The currency of life is choice. You either choose a never tried before path and pay the price by paving the road for your choice, shouldering the risks and uncertainties, or you choose the well worn, already paved path to dodge the costs, which frankly is more like following than choosing at all. Because in the end, in these uncertainties, we find new possibilities, bringing us novel insights and solutions which pay back for our efforts, rewarding us further exchange of life to propel us forward for new choices. So if you don't choose, but act as if you are pretending to choose by going for the already built path, the problem you are dealing with will persist. That's why some problems persist. How much energy you paid, how much trust you put to your intuition, how good your intentions are doesn't matter. Whatever you do, they simply persist. To solve them, you should opt in for the wilderness, but you need things and tools with you to survive in the unfamiliar. For the last couple of weeks, I'm giving you some tools that may help you in this realm. System thinking is one of these tools that can help your journey succeed because our traditional reductionist perspective exclusively offers the worn out paths, which is not a choice at all, and inescapably leads to vicious cycles. One of the dilemmas in this reductionist thinking is that it tends to approach problems as if they are totally new and standalone, while offering you the already worn out paths as a solution. However, the truth is no single problem in life is isolated and never existed before. Yet you need to act in a novel way through understanding the interconnections within the system and similarities to other systems. Myths, legends, and stories of all kinds are actually the way humanity invented to transfer knowledge to next generations about problems they face, how they approached these problems and solved or failed to solve and suffered from the consequences. And similar to the invention of myths, system thinking offers us the system archetypes, which simply tells repeating behaviors in any system from microcosm to macrocosm. Think of these archetypes like the tales you have been told in your childhood that prepare you for challenges ahead, becoming heroes of our own journeys. These archetypes prepares you to the wilderness, the problem you are about to face, and give you the information about what to expect, when, and how to mitigate them. Once you see these archetypes, you can't unsee them. They are everywhere, in every system we have created or belong to. And what's fascinating is that these archetypes aren't new, they are ancient, their essence woven into the myths to pass down this wisdom through centuries. Each archetype captures a cycle or structure that repeats across time. For example, the story of Icarus is actually the story of limits to growth system archetype. You know the story. Icarus, given wings made of feathers and wax by his father Daedalus, flies too close to the sun despite warnings of his father. His ambition and desire for higher symbolize unchecked growth, but he faces the ultimate limit when the wax melts, causing him to fall to his death. This myth essentially tells the dangers of ignoring limits while enjoying growth and highlights the inevitable consequences of overreaching. Another good one from Greek mythology is the story of Odysseus and the lotus eaters. Odysseus' men encounter the lotus eaters whose plans make them forget their journey home rather than facing the hardships of their journey. They are tempted to the temporary comfort of the lotus, and this nearly traps them forever. Hopefully, Odysseus realizes the effects of lotus on his men and intervenes, being aware of the fact that staying on that island would mean abandoning their mission to go back home. He physically drags them, despite their resistance and pleas to remain. And this myth tells the story of shifting the burden system archetype, illustrating risks of relying on temporary solutions instead of confronting the true challenges. So, we are at this crossroads. Do we keep traveling familiar paths that fail to solve our biggest problems? Or do we set out into the unknown, exploring new ways to tackle them? Next time, choose the unfamiliar and grab the compass of system thinking in your hands to guide you through complexity. But this compass does more than pointing to true north. It reveals the hidden architecture within our challenges, and it gives us tools to break free from the cycles we are not even aware of. To guide you, each system archetype reflects a situation, a familiar cycle we might see in business, personal life, or even in society at large. And just like these stories, they give us foresight. They show us what's likely to happen if we continue on a certain path, and more importantly, how to navigate it. Without further ado, let's dive into 5 of the most common archetypes. Each one reveals a specific recurring pattern in how systems behave, offering both insights and a way forward when we are willing to look deeper and take intentional steps. Let's begin with the limits to growth system archetype. Imagine a startup launches an app and it quickly gains popularity. The user base grows, pushing the app service to the capacity. At first, the company scales up servers to meet demand, but soon the growth outpaces their infrastructure capabilities and cost burden capacities because of the poor architecture. Response times lag, user satisfaction drops, and new customers churn faster than they arrive. The growth has reached a hard limit, becoming unsustainable without a significant reinvestment for the infrastructure. Let's look at the behavioral patterns that can be visible over time. In this case, and almost in all similar cases, limits to growth typically starts with rapid progress, an upward trend of growth or improvement, though over time growth slows and eventually plateaus or declines as the limiting factor becomes a bottleneck. Whatever effort the company puts except restructuring. This archetype features a reinforcing loop of growth. In our case, it is total company efforts leading to user growth, which encounters a balancing loop as resources, capacity, or attention becomes stretched. In our case, it is the server capacity gap, driven by lack of infrastructure, becomes apparent as user base grows. The initial momentum of the reinforcing loop slows as the limiting factor exerts pressure, restricting further growth. And here is the generic mechanism that can be seen in any limits to growth system archetype. For example, Icarus's case, the performance is altitude of Icarus, efforts is his desire to fly higher, limiting action is his wings capability gap, and constraint is lack of heat resistance, obviously. So, how to manage this archetype and solve genuinely? First, you need to draw behavior over time graph for the parameter in question. And once you see the pattern of fast growth, slow growth, and the plateau or decline, you know that you are most likely dealing with the limit to growth archetype. Then you need to draw the causal diagram beginning with the generic one and giving further details at each element. For example, you need to detail the total company effort in the reinforcing loop because what generic one suggests is a higher element in the system and it should be broken down into departments, KPIs, projects, etc. Then, to address limits to growth, it is crucial to anticipate the details of constraints corresponding to these new sub-elements. To do this, you can do workshops, interviews, organization-wide questionnaires. You should gather as much as insight you can and then plan for intervention to these constraints. It can be between prioritizing investments to expand that related capacities or to complete structure change of working model. For the app company, solutions could include optimizing server loads, upgrading infrastructure, or exploring cloud solutions. Proactively identifying and addressing the growth limiting factor can transform the challenge into a manageable scaling opportunity. Okay, now let's look at the second system archetype, success to the successful. Although we love the rags to riches stories, which tells miraculous life starting from zero and building empires and pleases our deepest desires, the truth is that starting point matters a lot. And success to the successful archetype tells us how. But there's a catch. If our rags manage to work one of their trials out and levels up their starting point, then this archetype machine does the job for the rest of the time. That's why we have a culture of try, fail, learn, and try harder next time. We will talk about this later, so if you don't want to miss what's coming, subscribe now. But for the time being, let's focus on the details of this archetype. Imagine two individuals launching competing firms. The first person, let's call him Andrew, comes from wealth and has extensive connections with the industry leaders. Andrew can afford to hire top talent, market aggressively, and tap into a vast network of referrals and clients. His business gains traction quickly, attracting high profile clients and earning a reputation for quality and results. With each new client, his credibility and visibility grow, reinforcing his success. Now, consider Taylor, a middle class individual starting a similar firm but without the financial and network advantages. Taylor is skilled and hardworking but struggles to reach the same clients. She lacks the budget for marketing and depends mostly on word of mouth referrals within a smaller circle. Despite her expertise, her reach is limited, and while her firm performs decently, it remains in the shadow of Andrew's expanding success. As the time goes on, Andrew's firm continues to accumulate more resources, allowing for even better hires and further reaching marketing thanks to his robust sales in the early days. Taylor's firm, meanwhile, can only grow incrementally. So the result, Andrew's early advantage has created a reinforcing loop of success that continually puts Taylor at disadvantage despite her skill set. Now let's look at behavioral patterns over time. In this archetype, you often see a widening gap. One part of the system thrives while others decline. Early advantages cascade into greater successes while those with fewer resources struggle. In this archetype, the reinforcing loop of success works in favor of Andrew's firm, driving more resources and clients to his firm simply because of his early advantages of wealth and network, feeding his firm's perception. Meanwhile, Taylor's firm faces a reinforcing loop that limits its growth through increased perception of Andrew's firm, because each small gain is often overshadowed by Andrew's expensive reach. And here is a more generic version of the success to the successful archetype. The system essentially creates a widening gap where success continually reinforces itself for one party, leaving others with fewer opportunities to break through. This success to the successful archetype is actually present in all over societies. It can be traced from political candidates to TV stars. Although the principle of equal opportunity in Western societies try to mitigate this effect for social wealth distribution, it is open to debate whether these policies enact are enough. Anyway, this is a topic for another day to discuss in details. Let's look into how to manage this archetype when you are trapped in one. First, you need to draw the pattern or trend graph for the parameter in question. Once you see a widening gap in the graph, you can be sure that there's something related to the success to the successful archetype. Then you should draw the current causal loops in system, starting from the generic one and detailing each higher element step by step. And when you have a workable system design at hand, you can start to think for interventions. Breaking out this archetype requires creating opportunities for more equitable access to resources in the system design. In an organizational setting, companies can implement mentorship programs, or in general business domain, organizations of all kinds can create grants for entrepreneurs from less connected backgrounds to level the playing field of them. When there is no system intervention from the designer of the system who set the rules like governments, you need to either leverage your strength to close the gap or cooperate with the ones who are in similar situation. For example, in Taylor's case, we have three potential strategies that may leverage her. First one, building a strategic partnership with other small firms where her company's capabilities matches well with the partner, which could extend her reach. Second one is focusing on a niche expertise that could attract a dedicated client base, or a mix of both if she has enough resources to handle both. Remember that recognizing and addressing the resource gap early on can help counterbalance the success loop. Now, let's continue with the next one, which is my favorite: fixes that fail. It is my favorite because this archetype is embedded so deeply in our cognitive biases that it is usually hard to accept the cause of fail for the decision maker. Let's look at the following business story. A retail company struggling with low customer satisfaction decides to cut prices drastically, hoping to boost sales. Initially, the lower prices attract customers and improve sales numbers. However, profit margins take a hit, leaving the company unable to invest in staff training or improve product quality. Over time, customer satisfaction dips again, but now they are locked into low pricing with a worsened reputation. The initial fix has not only failed but exacerbated the original problem. The fixes that fail pattern usually shows temporary improvement followed by a return to the problem state or even worse situation. Each fix creates additional dependency without solving the underlying issue. In this story, retail company cuts the prices to boost sales because they did not address the real problem. It worsens after a moderate growth. This archetype includes a balancing loop for the quick fix, which temporarily stabilizes the problem, but the reinforcing loop, involving the unintended consequences, accumulates over time, making the system's reliance on fixes harder to escape. For our retailer example, to deal with the customer dissatisfaction, they decide to decrease prices, which helps them to lower the complaints, but also creates a lack of available funding to be used for quality improvements and training. To handle fixes that fail, like the previous archetypes, we first begin with drawing behavior patterns over time and causal loops. Then we focus on understanding the root cause rather than applying temporary solutions. For the retailer, investing in quality improvements and staff training would create lasting customer satisfaction instead of eroding profits. Addressing the core issue, quality and service, rather than relying on discounts, helps establish a sustainable path. Now, let's continue with the sister of fixes that fail archetype, which is shifting the burden. Imagine a software company encounters frequent bugs and issues due to rushed development timeline. To manage, they set up a dedicated team for patching the bugs. Over time, the development team relies on this fixed team to handle post-release issues rather than improving coding practices. The burden shifts, making the fixed team indispensable. However, software quality continues to drop as developers no longer prioritize robust code from the outset because we have a fixed team. So, in this case, the patterns are like this. Shifting the burden often manifests as a dependency on quick fixes or external solutions with little focus on the underlying cause. Systems may stabilize for a while, but the core problem continues to worsen. It is similar to fixes that fail archetype in terms of behavior patterns, but this time the fix becomes the habit, a standard practice to deal with the symptom, usually followed by another problem to solve. And the systemic structure looks like this. This archetype has two balancing loops. One involving the symptomatic solution, which temporarily resolves the issue, and the other one involving the fundamental solution, which remains unaddressed. The reinforcing loop further entrenches reliance on the symptomatic fix and weakens the system's self-reliance. So for example, in our case, problem is frequent development bugs and issues. And instead of investing to increase the level of coding standards, company shifts the burden on their quick fix, the fix team. And as problem increases, the dependency on fixed team increases, while the real cause remains and real solution delays. So how to manage this problem? Similar to fixes that fail, breaking this cycle requires addressing the root problem directly again, while decreasing the intervention from symptomatic solution. In the software company case, implementing better coding standards and training the development team would gradually reduce the need for fixed team, shifting focus back to prevention. This creates a more sustainable workflow and reduces reliance on reactive fixes. All right, let's move to the final archetype I want to talk for today, that is escalation. It is one of the easiest to spot but hardest to manage. Let's look at why. Imagine two tech companies compete for market dominance in smart home devices. When one lowers prices, the other matches. Soon, both companies are locked in a race to the bottom, each one lowering prices to outdo the other. Profit margins shrink, and product quality starts to suffer because costs are cut to maintain competitiveness. In the end, both companies have eroded their brand value without achieving a real advantage. So let's see how patterns develop over time in this archetype. Escalation shows us a spiraling pattern of actions where each move by one side provokes an equal or greater response by the other. Things can be escalated to degrees, like in our case, price wars, or can be escalated to increase, like armed conflicts between nations or groups. The cycle intensifies over time, leading to increasing costs, resource and trust depletion, or diminished returns. When you see these patterns, it is better to refer to the generic escalation structure, which is built on two intersecting balancing loops, where each party's actions feed into other's response, driving an escalating sequence, a reinforcing loop of escalation in the figure 8 form, because of the disturbed safety perception of each parties. For example, in our case, company A thinks that company B is insidiously doing something which can lead to loss their market share. So proactively they decide to decrease their price to prevent it before happening. And when the results increase their market share and decrease B's market share, this time B sees the threat and decreases further. And the war continues until either side or both sides collapses, because this cycle often leads to outcomes detrimental to both sides, especially when each action results in mutually destructive behavior. Managing escalation requires recognizing when a competitive strategy becomes self-defeating. This is actually pretty important because even the most cunning strategists can fall into this trap. And when you fall, there is only two ways out. You either differentiate your source of value, which is differentiating your product or shifting to some adjacent market in a business setup, or moving to another zone if it is a land war, or you communicate with the other party to find a collaborative solution. That's why diplomacy resolves countless conflicts even before they escalate. For the case of our smart home device companies, rather than undercutting each other, they could innovate unique features or focus on brand loyalty to escape the escalation loop. Keep in mind that finding a collaborative or differentiated approach preserves resources and brand reputation in the long run. And that's that. These archetypes hopefully will help you what to expect in the wilderness and which potential strategies may be useful to deal with them. They are not the reason to go out the journey, but some mere guides for you. Remember, only you can walk in the unfamiliar and find novel approaches to solve the unsolvable. That's it for the video. I appreciate you watching. Check the links in the description for the written format and subscribe my channel for the upcoming videos. Thanks again. Bye.